In this video, we're going to explore ego and ecology, constructive ego and destructive ego. And as preamble, I want to just mention that all my life in New Age alternative circles, I've heard ego referenced as this horrible thing. This person has a big ego. Well, ego is bad, so a big ego is worse. This person is in ego. Ego is bad, so now this person is bad because they are in what is bad. And it's rare for anyone to actually take the time to delineate, to articulate what is an ego. And so, first of all, let's look at that. So in identity, we have the I and we have the identity. Now, the I is the particle, the masculine, the one, in relationship with the circle. And the circle and the sphere, as one of the most mystical shapes, one of the most powerful shapes in geometry, is a paradox between the infinite and the one. Because when a computer generates a sphere, a circle, the computer uses its maximum chip power, often it's around 256 million distinctions, to create dots. And you can create a circle out of 1,000 dots, 10,000 dots, 1,000,000 dots, 256 million dots, 1,000,000,000 dots. Because when you combine enough dots, you get a circle. Now, the other way that computers create circles is with planes and lines. And in this way, you create these different lines. And after you create enough of them, a circle begins to emerge. And so a computer doesn't create a circle. A computer creates thousands upon thousands of dots or lines, and out of that, the eye sees a circle. And so is the circle one, the yin, the ecology, or is it the many, the masculine, the yang, the dot, the isolated individual? And of course, it's both, and that's what makes it such a powerful expression of grace and geometry. Now, the I is the view or the circle of boundary, the distinct self. Because if we're a we, there doesn't need to be an I. There's an ownership of the ecology, of the yin, the interconnectedness. Now, this is deeply innate, meaning in a chauvinistic culture such as our own, where the masculine is elevated and the feminine is sublimated, there is a tremendous emphasis on me and I as distinct from the family, the community, the group. But of course, this is absurd. You ask a scientist to prove that I'm me separate from everything else. And you say, prove it, scientist. I mean, show me how my body has nothing to do with all the other bodies, and how all the other bodies have nothing to do with the planet, and how the planet has nothing to do with the solar system, and how the solar system has nothing to do with the galaxy, and the galaxy has nothing to do with the universe. And you can't do it. I mean, if you think about it carefully, this fingernail is connected to the Big Bang. You say, no, it's not connected to the Big Bang. What does it have to do with the Big Bang? Well, something pretty profound to start off. One is, if the Big Bang didn't happen, this didn't happen. Well, that's a pretty strong connection. Meaning if you delete the Big Bang, and the fingernail disappears on the time continuum and stops existing, you have to say there is a profound connection between the Big Bang and this fingernail. Well, what about a possibility field? Can you delete? You think of what a possibility field is. Now, a directional possibility field, you have 360 degrees. This is just sheer nonsense on one level. You could divide the degrees into 1,000,000 degrees. You could divide it into 1,000,000,000,000 degrees. But we're happy with 365. I guess we're copying the days of the sun. And so we're just calling a circle 300. We're dividing a circle by 365. So you say that's the possibility field. And of course, it is in fact infinite because you can divide a circle by 10 trillion and counting. You can divide a circle by infinity because whatever the increment is, you can always cut it in half. We've never gotten to the bottom of space. We've never gotten to the top of space. You can always double it, and you can always double that, and you can always double that. We've never gotten to the top or the bottom of space. Now, we say we've gotten to the beginning of time, but we don't know what happened before the Big Bang in that narrative. And we certainly don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 trillion years, let alone infinity. We haven't gotten to the beginning or the end of time. Now, imagine that this circle is the possibility field. But one of the days in the 365 degrees or the 365 days, you want to delete one of them. So you come in here, you see, you tried to delete one and the whole circle deleted. I just want to delete one of these days. You see, but the nature of a possibility field is that everything is possible in a possibility field. You cannot have a mathematical possibility field if you delete one of the possibilities. It ceases to be a possibility field. It'd be like trying to delete one day of the year and then having the next day continue after the pause. So you're moving through the year, moving along, and then you just delete this day, right? And you're going to just continue the rest of the year. Well, how do you delete a day for the universe? Well, you just erase the entire universe now, and then 24 hours later, after you've been erased as part of the universe, you start it up again. And what happens? You got erased. First of all, you cannot have a year with one missing day and still have the time-space continuum. It doesn't hold up. And so the question is, in this kind of more mysterious illusion of I, if we erased one of the great-grandparents, could you still exist? Now, if you're 10,000 generations in on a certain line and erasing one of those relatives 10,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, you erase one of those relatives and you stop existing. Well, doesn't that suggest a very deep connection between you and 50,000 years ago? Now, what if we delete the sun from the equation? Do you still exist? Well, how are you separate from the sun if the sun going out and vanishing for a week sends sub 200 degrees below zero temperatures crashing down on the planet and you're dead. So you've obviously got a lot to do with the sun. And you've got a lot to do with all those animals that took different paths in the evolutionary dynamic. So we call I the separate pattern, but it's a bit problematic. It's a little bit of a card trick, because you cannot mathematically separate one single thing innately from every other thing. If you delete one single thing from the equation of all that is, you collapse the possibility field for all that is. If you collapse the possibility field, delete it, then you don't get possibility squared becoming probability, a denser form of reality, and you don't get probability squared becoming actuality, the densest form of reality. So if you delete the possibility field, you also delete the probability field, and you delete the actuality field, and there's nothing left. So you and every single identity is in fact an innate part of the possibility field, mathematically speaking, of all that is. Well, we just create it anyway. This is me, that's not me. It doesn't hold up under scrutiny, but that's fine. We all agree not to look. We say, okay, that's you. That's your room. Has nothing to do with the rest of the house, right? Which has nothing to do with the rest of the neighborhood, which has nothing to do with the rest of the country, which had nothing to do with your entire ancestral history, which had nothing to do with the Big Bang. No, that's your room. And you know, it's just fictitiously partitioned away from everything else. And we say, yeah, this is your room and this is my room, and we're going to pretend that they are completely separate. And this is my body. It's not your body. And so we create this identity. Now, the I is the one that identifies with what is separate, with this body. In fact, the identity has several key components. The first thing is a pattern of thinking. How do I know I'm me? Well, I remember. I member, put something together. I remember it. I put it together again. I wake up and I remember. I was this way yesterday, and I thought this way yesterday, and then I thought this way the way before that, and then I thought this way the way before that. It must be me because I'm thinking today what I thought yesterday. It's a pattern of thinking. And this pattern is mine. That pattern is yours. This pattern is mine. Now, of course, thought is predicated on language. It's founded on language. Well, where did the language come from? Well, it came from your cult. Where did your cult come from? Well, it came as it migrated from other cults. And where did they come from? Well, they migrated out of different animals and this and that. And where did that come from? So again, your thoughts are part of the ecological fabric. You couldn't think a single thought without language, and you couldn't have language. Meaning, if you took you and stuck you on a desert island from the moment of birth with no language and no people and no anything, you could not think coherently. The language is based on an evolutionary meme called language. Well, you know, so it's you, but it's really an iterative expression of everyone else that has ever been. Now then you have your pattern of feeling. Here's your pattern of feeling. Now, this is not a distinct pattern. So your thoughts are largely given to you by your cult. Your language is unquestionably given to you by your cult. And you have feelings in response to your thoughts. If you think you're going to die, you feel differently based on that thought than if you think you're going to have a peak experience. You feel differently based on your thoughts. The densest form of thought is belief. When you have faith with belief and think based on that thought and that belief, you are fully convinced, not that it's a possibility, that it's going to happen. And so your feelings are the densest in response. When you know, you're not dead yet. How do you know? I just know. I believe. I know what happens when this and this and this happen. I am going to die. Okay, your feelings respond to that. But they're your feelings, right? Well, why do you have those feelings? You're going to die. You're happy, you're excited. This is the great unknown, right? The great horizon. The place where no one's been before. No one's gone through your particular death. It's exciting. You've been waiting your whole life to see what's happening. So why isn't that thought there? Well, your cult didn't give it to you. Got to save them. We got to save them. From what? From dying. From the great unknown. From the great we gotta do something. They're gonna die. Oh my God, we failed. Oh my goodness, they died. When you're surrounded by a death-phobic cult since birth, and you see all the people you look up to rushing around trying to stop death at all costs. I'm afraid of death. You do not think, this is the most amazing time in my life. It's just so exciting. For 90 years, I've waited for this moment. For 90 years, I've waited for this moment. And it's like, why not think that one? Well, it's not normal. Well, what's normal? It's what other people are thinking. And why do that? Well, it's our identity. You see, we are a materialistic cult. We are a rationalistic cult. We believe that there is no life after the death of the body. And so we're going to do our best to prolong existence because, poof, you just stop existing because we're rational. Now, you don't want to be one of those kooky, irrational, spiritual people, do you? No, you wouldn't want to be looked down on by all of us. All of your friends, everyone looked down at you because you're so kooky. Oh. Passed over for promotion, not given all the perks of rank, of those who conform to the cult. It's like, no, I don't want that. I want all the perks of all the stuff if I perform and fit into the cult. Well then, rational people in this day and age do not believe in anything that doesn't have evidence. And we have no evidence because we haven't conducted any experiments after we're dead. And so there must not be anything after death, and any rational person would certainly agree and so choose eternal emptiness rather than break with your peers. So this was stuff you came up, no, 99.9% of all cults in human history have believed in life after death, but your cult, no, your cult is different. So you can see there's a correlation between the small identity, your identity, and the big identity. So you have the cult over here, and you have the I over here. but the cult shapes the I, and the I conforms to the cult. Like, why do all the Japanese eat sushi? It's disgusting, isn't it? Raw fish, uncooked fish. Unless you go and learn, and then you realize, oh no, it's a delicacy. Why do all these people eat grasshoppers? Those horrible bugs, get them away from me. And then you realize, oh, it's a delicacy. Grasshoppers, trace minerals. Oh, you copy your cult. So your identity mirrors your cult identity, which gives you the language, which gives you the memes that you copy to create your sense of I, your sense of belong. We eat hamburgers. We like fast cars. We are Democrats. We are Republicans. That's us. We think like this. We feel in response to those thoughts. Now, we also say things. We say things like this. That's part of the identity. I'm the one who talks like this. I have this kind of sounding voice. It's at this kind of pitch. It has a little bit of inflection. It has this speed. It's a little bit particular. It has a kind of hint of a European accent, a little bit of British overtones, but it sounds like this. That's my sound. So it's a sound, right? It's a sensation. Zzz. It's a vibration. That's me. That's my sound. I have this frequency and rhythm and stuff. You can tell it's me. Why? How can you tell it's me? Well, you talked that way yesterday, and you talked that way the day before that, and you talked that way the day before that. And so when you hear yourself, you say, that's me, because you heard that voice before. So it's a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and being. Moving in the body, sensing. You could say a pattern of sensing. I sound this way. I taste this way. I look this way. I look in the mirror, and yesterday I saw a little bit of hair. It's not just suddenly in one day grown 3 feet. If it did, I might say, that's not me. How do I know it's not me? Well, it's not the way it was before. So an I is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. It's 5 patterns. Thinking, feeling, speaking, being, and doing. So those are my patterns. And the cult, with its goal of creating attunement and conformity, has prescribed, this is the way to talk in this situation. No, you don't say that you don't like the food. But I don't like the food. You said to tell the truth, and I don't like this food. No. You're at somebody else's house, says the cult, through its emissaries, right? The parents, the emissaries of the cult. No. You never tell the truth about someone else's cooking in their house. You tell the truth other places, yes, but not here. And you don't do it over here either, says the cult. But over here, you tell the truth. If your teacher says, what kind of shirt are you wearing? And you say, it's a green shirt. And they say, no, it's blue. Don't lie. Don't lie about that. You say it's a blue shirt if it's a blue shirt, and you say it's a green shirt. Don't do that. That's horrible. But over here, lie. Don't tell the truth. And how do cults come up with this stuff? Well, cults are very self-referential. That just means a circular pattern. We do this because we did that, and we did that because that's what we do. And we do it because that's who we are. And that's who we are because that's the best way to do things. Every cult tells its members that this is the best cult in town. This is the only one that counts. Because what kid would learn the cult nonsense dished out to them by, inane parents, teachers, and government officials if the parents in the cult told the truth, and they said, look, there have been 10,000 cults in human history, according to anthropologists. And every single one of them told their kids, this is the only way to do things, just do it this way. Because this is the right way. This is God's way. God likes people wearing top hats. God likes the British Navy. God likes this. God likes it our way. God's on our side. This is the right way because I said so. And I said so because it's the right way. So there have been these 10,000 cults, each with their own language, each with their own cosmology. In some cults, the earth was created by a great serpent eating its tail. In another one, it was a giant sea lizard. And then there was this myth and that myth. And each one has its own unique beginning and its own unique end. Our beginning, our myth, is that we were created out of nothing for no particular reason. Poof! And here comes the entire universe, and it has absolutely no meaning whatsoever. It's probably one of the first cults in history that has differentiated itself by making life meaningless. Because if you were here in American soil 500 years ago, everything had meaning. The tree had meaning. Everything was your sister and brother, because the Native Americans understood that somewhere in the journey from slime to humanity, life went this way and created birds, and life went this way and created snakes, and life went this way and created trees. And they were all my relations. In the distant past, we were all of the same slime. And then the slime moved this way, and this one became this one and this. They are all my brothers and sisters is a visceral scientific fact. It's just a matter of time. It's like, no, I didn't, my father didn't give birth to a monkey. That's not my brother. It's a matter of time frame. The earth gave birth to all of it. The solar system gave birth to the earth. The galaxy gave birth to the solar system, so you could say the universe is the great mother that gave birth to everything. And we are the children of the earth, and every creature on the earth was once us, because it was once slime, it was once bacteria, it was once soil, it was once plants. And we emerged out of that as one point on the possibility, come probability, come actuality continuum. We could have gone this way, but we went this way. We could have gone that way, but we went this way. And here's where we are. We did this way, then we did that way, then we did this way, we did that way, and then here's where we are. But every other thing in existence, we share the same origins, the same ancestry, the same timeline, the same time-space continuum as everything else. And if we're to believe the current myth that we came out of less than the size of a pea, then we are related to that pea. And through our hereditary connection with that dense form of energy that burst into being and became everything, and then now we're on one of a billion life-affirming planets that we can already spot with our little telescopes in a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of a tiny, tiny speck of the universe. But one time, we were all bedfellows. The possibility of the left side of the galaxy and the universe and all this was millimeters away from the extreme light years of the others. We were all packed into the same bed. And poof. It's just a matter of time. Is something my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, if it's 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1 million, 1 billion, 24 billion years old? Now, our Native American, without nuclear physics, felt and related to everything in the Americas as sacred and as self. My brother, my sister, the deer. My brother, my sister, the buffalo. My brother and sister, the white people. Now, you could say they were more in touch with reality at a scientific level, and that the Westerners, the ones coming west, were more in touch with the cult. Because the natives, to a large extent, dealt with the Europeans as brothers and sisters in a different branch of the original tree. But the Europeans related to the Native Americans as savages, as nothing. In Christianity, it is heresy to acknowledge the connection between a human being and the evolution of life. It's heresy to acknowledge the relationship between the human being and a monkey or an ape. And so we don't even get that far within the paradigm of dogmatic religion. Because if you cannot even acknowledge that the apes are our brothers and sisters, then you cannot acknowledge that the birds that became monkeys are our brothers and sisters. We cannot acknowledge that the crocodiles that became birds or the birds that became we cannot acknowledge that we are connected to the bacteria, to the soil, to the plants, to the earth. And so we are severed mentally through the lens of the cult from all other species. Now, an anthropologist can take us back a few 100,000 to a few million years and say all human life emerged out of the Africas in these people, and some spread this way, and some grew this way, and some became this way, and some became that way. All human life came from the same source, which means that every human, scientifically speaking, is brothers and sisters with every other human. But cults have always been unscientific. You can bring the data to a school principal that, kids would really benefit learning to deal with trauma. They're going through it. They're causing it. They're being traumatized. And the data suggests that they would really benefit with a class and a workshop in high school on trauma, childhood abuse, and the like. But a principle isn't rational. And a principle isn't a principle if they don't behave the way that the cult defines principles to behave. So the principle may even agree. And so you'd say, okay, so you're going to tell your kids the next day, hold it, I know we're in the middle of naming dead people and counting wars, called history, the history of killing people, but we're actually going to do something a lot more relevant. We're going to talk about why the suicide rate is so high in America and the complications that come from not dealing with trauma. Now, if the kids go home and tell their parents they're studying trauma, childhood abuse, and emotional literacy, the parents will be upset. Not because there's anything wrong. It's closer to the data. If you take 10 kids and you teach these kids how to negotiate and navigate relationships and feelings, and you take these kids and you teach them the names of dead presidents and wars, and then you test them 35 years later and you ask them, which was more useful to you? Knowing whether Abraham Lincoln did this in 1857 or 1859? No, you dummy, he wasn't around then. It was in 1920. Or knowing how to diffuse hate and seek support in a difficult situation. Which one was useful to you in your life? Did you ever have a boss sexually harassing you and you blurted out the inauguration date of Abraham Lincoln and it just all magically disappeared because it was such a useful bit of knowledge in daily life? So there's a big, big tension between the cult and science. Now, religion is, of course, part of the cult because what makes a cult is dogma. It's this endless loop that goes round and round. The Bible says that the Bible is the only word of God. So it must be the only word of God because the Bible said so. And because it's the word of God, you have to listen to the Bible. And the Bible says to listen to the Bible. And so there it is. There's no room in such an equation because it's a circular equation. There's no outside validation. And as long as you can keep a population culturally illiterate, you can hold on to your cult. But as soon as kids realize, do you mean that 95% of all cults, all cultures in human history are dead? And all those parents that told their children, do this, don't do that, and they're dead. That was the only way of doing things. That 95% of all the parents who spoke about the dogma of their cult, their religion, their cult, that 95% of them are now dead cultures, extinct, with dead languages and dead belief systems, that every one of them thought was the way of things, suggesting that there's a 95% chance that in a few thousand years, our cult, as we define our dogmas today, the things we do because that's why we do them, that those dogmas are going to be dead as well. The Christians may have been able to imprison Galileo, harass him, beat him up, threaten to excommunicate him, threaten to throw him into hell for all eternity because the earth didn't go around the sun went around the earth. But most of us don't believe that anymore. How long did it take for that to die? A few hundred years? So what about the changes in the next 10,000? Do you really think that there is anything going on today that will not be viewed as incredibly barbaric? You see, the suicide rate in Native American tribes is not as high as in the United States. Of the more than 30,000 Americans who commit suicide actively, putting a gun to their head, that kind of thing, rather than just drinking themselves to death and sabotaging their lives, which is in the millions, of the tens of thousands of Americans that break all mammalian traditions and actively participate in their own death to escape the pain of the cult, Native Americans were not committing suicide because it wasn't as lonely and it wasn't as miserable to believe in a cult that honored the innate relationship with all things and in which all things were your brothers and sisters and all things were connected and were sacred when you were part of the divine plan, as you were, when you could not be divorced from your origin, from your reality, from your innate connection to all things. It was a less painful cult. Still a bunch of beliefs, identities, thoughts, feelings. Why did the Native American children believe their parents? Because their parents said so. Just like we believe ours, who say that we're a worthless piece of shit who will never amount to anything. Why do you believe that shit? Because, you see, why do we believe that shit is derogatory? I mean, it's such a difficult thing to construct. And it speaks of the profound cult disconnect with science and reality. So we all know in this cult that calling someone a pile of shit is a derogatory term. It's bad. It's shaming. It devalues someone. Why? Because shit is bad, so to associate someone with shit makes them bad. But again, here's the divergence of the cult and the science. So you say, okay, why is shit bad? Because it's bad. You don't like smelling shit? What about water? You don't like drinking salt water. Is water a derogatory term? To say you cup of salt water? Is that derogatory? Is that an insult? No. Why? You like drinking salt water? No, of course I don't like drinking salt. But the cult hasn't bestowed the meaning of a curse, of a degrading association with salt water. How about smelling sulfur? Do you call people pieces of sulfur because sulfur smells worse than shit? And what is shit? Shit is the energy that is most potent to nourish trees. And what is fruit? Fruit is the shit of plants. A pineapple is the shit of a pineapple tree. We eat the shit, the waste, the byproduct, the excretion of plants. So they shit fruit and we shit fertilizer. And it's a nice balance, isn't it? Because if you ask a tree, would you like some shit? The tree is going to say, yes, thank you. That's the most sacred, amazing thing. That's the source of all life, and it is. So it's kind of interesting how the cult can take the source of all life. Because we go beyond just making shit derogatory as the most potent form of fertilizer for all life. Because if you take away all the shit, you take away all the fertilizer. If you take away all the fertilizer, all the plants die. If all the plants die, all the animals die. And if all the plants and all the animals die, all the humans die. And you're back to square one. What stops that from happening? What stops the domino effect? Shit. So of course it's a dirty word in a scientifically illiterate cult. Because cults are not scientific. They are inane in almost every respect. Because after we're done insulting the source of all life on the planet, potent fertilizer, feces, shit, whatever you want to call it, what else do we insult? Fucking, okay? Isn't that the source of all life as well? Yeah, kind of. So we really don't want to live, do we, in this cult? In this cult, you're dirty, you're a fucking idiot, you're full of shit. The source of all life is a curse. Fucking, the mating ritual that has given rise to our entire population, is derogatory. Shit, the source of all life on the planet, is derogatory. And being dirty, you don't want to be dirty. A dirty whore, a dirty this. Well, what is dirt? It is what every living thing grows out of. Take away, we don't want anything dirty, right? So let's just be a God-fearing cult and strip the entire ecology of dirt and fertilizer and fucking, and bow down to the creator of all that is and go extinct in a matter of hours. Because we're fucking crazy. And the trouble with being fucking crazy as a cult member that is absolutely insane. And of course, we have to use these absurd delineations. Fucking crazy is a compliment. But we have to distinguish within the illusion of language which creates all these artificial polarities. Something to be better than something else, which is a little bit of a difficult situation on some level, because all things are connected. If white is better than black, but it ceases to exist as a meaningful thing without polarity, if it goes completely unconscious without black, if it cannot exist without contrast, then mathematically they are equal. If you cut a circle in half, which is what you do when you create a polarity, first of all, the two halves cannot exist without one another. And secondly, they're so interconnected, it is meaningless in the abstract, in the extreme, to pretend one is better than another. And yet we do, through the lens of I, through the lens of identity. This necklace is better than this other one. This shirt is better than the one that is like this. All of these different things. So our cults are insane, and our religion is part of the cult, and our memes, our cult memes, they're part of our cult. But all cults value conformity, demand conformity to one degree or another of the members of the cult. And there's a bribe. If you will agree to go insane, number one, and two, you will agree to go insane in the same way that we've gone insane, number two. And then, if you will suspend rationality and disbelief and pretend that the fact that everyone is insane is sufficient to redefine the definition of sanity, we will reward you. You will be one of us. And what are the perks of being one of us? Well, when you're born, you have a need to survive. You have a need to feel secure in that survival. You have a need for love and belonging. You have a need for self-esteem. You have these core needs, the first four in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. You have these needs. And you can't meet them without us. And we're not going to help you meet them unless you fit into these norms. Do as I say because I said so, or we just might let you die. We might just disown you. We might banish you from this family. You see, and it's so efficient to have the cooperation of the family, the cult. It's so efficient to have that cooperation that just do it our way. It'll be easier for all of us. We won't have to think, and you won't have to think, and we won't have to accommodate you, and you can just copy us. It's just very, very easy. And so just do what all that we're saying. And this is, of course, how the identity is a microcosm, a fractal expression of the cult. And what is the cult? It is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. If you travel the world looking at different tourists from different countries, you can spot the American. Because the American is an individual. And so you can spot an American anyway by noticing the person who's loudly proclaiming that they're an individual. And you'll get the joke if you're a Monty Python fan. And otherwise, heaven help you. I mean, get your comedy together. So this, the cult becomes the identity. The identity becomes a fictional reference point. It's not real, but it is repetitive. And so the benefit of a repetitive pattern of an identity is, first of all, stability. This is the benefit of a cult, is stability. Now, why do you want stability? Well, if everything's constantly moving all the time, and first I thought I was this, then I thought I was that, now I'm part of the earth, I'm part of a blade of grass, now I'm part of this tribe, now I'm part of the snow, and if everyone is constantly moving in this and that way, if there's no language, then there's no sense of growth. There's no sense of the distinct self relating to the whole. Now, we create this stable platform by automating about 90% of our lives. If you look at 90% of our lives over the last month, 90% of people's lives are repetitive patterns. You look at person A, exhibit A, right? They looked up, oh gosh, what would I do marrying that person? Now they feel perfectly at home and they recognize themselves immediately because they've thought that thought 1,000 times over the last 10 years. And so it's like, okay, that's me, obviously. And you would look at it if you watched them wake up and think the same thought over and over again. You'd say, that's them. I recognize them. What you're recognizing is their thought, their behavior, their feeling, their body language, their location, their habit of being in that house. See, there they are again in the same house. Why didn't they wake up in another house? Why didn't they move overnight? No. Wake up in the same house, think the same thoughts, feel the same feelings, and 90% of it is calcified into a largely unquestioned dogma. Now, this platform of repetitive norms creates a foundation and a reference point for the 10% of variant things. Today, I think I'll try a new peach tea at the normal restaurant, in the normal language, in my normal feelings, with the background algorithms going around and round and round. I'll try a new type of peach tea today, in my town, at my restaurant, at the same time of day. And see, we've got a tremendous amount of decision-making to do on a daily basis. We've got all of this stuff here to do. But I only have bandwidth to really think carefully about 10% of it. What should I wear? You see, I don't have the bandwidth while thinking about what should I wear to consider, do I want to believe the paradigm of the ancient Polynesians that we were a wandering flower upon the great breath of the mother, or that we are entitled Americans who deserve to be treated a certain way independently of the causative forces and data that would produce that effect, that it doesn't matter whether or not we as a cult are earning this money. We're entitled to the money whether we earn it or not. We are entitled to it. Or we are flowers on the great breath of the mother. Which one would serve me better today? I don't have time to learn about other cults. I'm a proud card-carrying member of my cult, the best cult, the only cult, like all cult members and all cults say throughout recorded history. And no one's going to tell me what to do, and da-da-da-da-da. So, but while I'm my proud carrying member of this, what should I wear? Should I go for the more modern look? Well, who said modern was good? Is it comfortable? Does it save money? Is it better for the environment? Well, no, it's modern. And why is that good? Well, it's good because it's good. We're a modern society. And who cares? What does that mean? It means we're making progress. Towards what? Deforestation? Towards what, bigger TVs? Well, what is the progress? Yes, we change the lines and things every year. Who changes them? Well, people who make lots of money getting us to buy the latest things. They change them. And that's a good thing because, Well, we're a capitalist cult. We've got to make money, of course. And why would people buy new things if the new thing wasn't the thing to buy, as decided by the leaders of the fashion cult? Well, we wouldn't. And then how would the economy grow? Don't ask all these questions. I mean, what are you talking about? Why should the economy grow? Of course, the economy should grow because we are a growing economy. Don't you understand? Didn't you go to school to learn the basics of the cult rule? We are a growing economy. Money is more important than human beings. We have to do more of this. We should have to buy more things. Should be contemporary. You didn't realize all this? I'm not going to explain it to you. My logic might be a bit shaky, but come on. I'll give you a look. And if you don't get it, if you're too dumb to understand that you'll be thrown out of the cult for not conforming, then we'll just not invite you to the party. And we all are cult members. And so having ostracized you through the cult belief system from all of creation and all of space-time, you've got nowhere left to go except the party. So when we don't invite you to our party, you feel completely alone and worthless and stuff, and break with all mammalian tradition and put a bullet through your head. And that's how our cult works. It's the only way to do it, believe me. And so we have this identity, this pattern, which creates the cult statistics. And then this pattern allows our individuality, or I should say our conscious mind, which is the little bit of our brain that can decide to think about something. Okay, I've picked my clothes. Now, the next problem, what am I going to eat? Should I fill up the tank with gas before or after my 3 p.m. appointment? If I do it before, if I do it after, well, I mean, this is a serious consideration, and it takes up the 10% of fluid, flexible RAM in the brain that can keep moving and debate these serious topics. Now, the purpose of the autopilot, of the dogma, of the cult, is to provide a mediocre fallback that's better than nothing. Because if we delete this and we overwhelm the conscious mind with every single decision on every single dimension, starting with, do you get up out of bed? What about if you feel bad? What about if the floor might have become liquid overnight? Do you still believe in physics? Do you think that working is a good idea? And do you believe that it's a good idea for this reason or for this other reason? If you flood the mind with that amount of chaos, it overwhelms the operating system of the mind by a factor of 9. And suddenly there's paralysis and overwhelm, and one cannot function. The conscious operating attention span is too thin to handle that complexity of spontaneous fluidity in a given moment. You know, you think of driving your car and you look up and you say, okay, there's no car for 300 yards. That means I have 3 seconds to look for my phone and plug it into the charger before I have to pay attention to the road again. If I drift a little bit towards the center or into the bike lane, it doesn't matter because I've scouted ahead and I've got 3 seconds that I can safely turn my laser beam of attention from the road to my phone before returning. But what if I was constantly bombarded with 1,000 different things from 1,000 different directions in 1,000 different ways. And I do not have the capacity. I'm flying blind with zero confidence that I'm not going to die in a given moment. It's paralysis. It's trauma. It is overwhelm. And it is the end of life. You cannot function at that level. And so what cults do is they establish norms for 90% of what happens. Now, these norms get debated, and many of them are quite old. And they get debated, and at one point, they kind of make sense. Maybe the British king who introduced the idea of the top hat was a bit of a midget. In a cult that ranked height at a time of sword playing, there was a time on the planet when the king was determined by who was still standing after trying to chop everyone to bits with a sword. And when the cult said, we want them to be the leader, and surprise, surprise, it was always a man. Men having bigger bodies, with arm muscles developed for hunting, with more experience since childhood in fighting and hunting. Surprise, surprise, might makes right, meant men are right for leadership. Because whether it was something as courteous as the Arthurian jousting, my fair lady, my opponent, please rise. Still, the winner, the king, was the one still on his horse at the end of the jousting match. And at a time of war and trying to farm and make things happen that were heavy and protect the family from raiders, kind of makes sense to have the strongest person, who would always be a man, be the king. Because if the ritual, if the cult is leading your men into battle, well, it is a little bit undignified if a pregnant woman, leads her men into battle and starts hacking away the sword, and then the king, the woman, the queen, is dead because the other side sent out a 6'4", 300-pound monster who could carry armor and just speared her. It's like, we don't want that. But so why are we doing that today? George Bush is not Mike Tyson. There's plenty of women who could knock George Bush Jr. out. So why still keep the tradition? Because it's become a cult meme, because then we have to allocate time to reconsider the algorithm. So an identity is a status quo. It is a pattern that stabilizes 90% of reality and says this is the way it is because this is the way it is, and it's that way because we do it, and we do it because it's that way. You clear? Don't ask questions because I said so. Okay, fine, we'll do it your way. We'll study the same things we were learning 100 years ago in school. We'll, of course, you would never elect a man, despite the fact that we're no longer jousting with rebels on horseback. 300 pounds now means you're going to die of a heart attack sooner. It doesn't mean you're going to knock the other person off his horse. Time for a little change. But the whole point of the cult is to resist change. The entire portion and function of the cult is to resist change. Why? To slow down the variables, the chaos, to the point where this tiny little bit of the conscious brain can decide what to wear, can decide what to eat, can decide what shoes to buy, and still have a little bit of brain power left over to say, maybe women should have the right to vote by 1920, even though it's an unpopular idea. Of course, I could be wrong. The cult is always right. They've never voted before. People are all equal, except women, of course. Let's see. What should I wear tomorrow? Oh, you're bringing up women's voting again. Oh, my goodness. Could we just drop that? So much to think about. I've got to buckle up my corset. I've got to do... Please. We'll be late for dinner. Now, this is the crisis of the cult, because the conscious mind is threatened with overwhelm if it has to deal and think intelligently about more than maybe 10% of their life at any given moment. The entire cult is rotten to the core. It's incredibly outdated and mediocre by a factor of 10. There isn't a single bit of the cult that couldn't be iterated to something 10 times better. But that's a lot of change. And in traumatized cults that are traumatically illiterate, fear of the unknown is the single biggest fear. And change always beckons the unknown. And so we fight the birth of intelligence. We fight evolution. We fight science. We fight the most competent people, because the most competent people are the people who are most fed up with mediocrity. That is completely and utterly unnecessary, except that everyone already knows how to do it. And if you admit it's mediocre and start from scratch, well, then you have to establish a new norm because everyone's overwhelmed. Oh my God. And this is one of the reasons for the hostility towards race, religion, type, skin, whatever. You're different. I don't want to think about that. I don't have the bandwidth to think about that. Go away so I don't have to think about it. Thank heavens, I'm back in my comfort zone where I don't have to think. See, other than what am I going to wear? What am I going to eat? Should I wear this one before this or this one before this? Should I believe this bit of nonsense or this bit of nonsense? Should I quote this versus that? We don't have to think. So we need the pattern to manage bandwidth. The pattern of the individual, the I, is always a fractal representation of the cult. The cult meme of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being around all the various things is the cult identity. And the identity is some iteration in relationship to the cult identity. Even if I'm not like them, the reference point is them, because that's the iterating starting point. And often there's a lot more similarities than there are differences in tone and in style, if not like it's popular for American children to rebel with their parents. Well, if everyone rebels in the same way for the same reason because that's what they do in the cult, it's not really a rebellion at some level. My cult says that I'm not a man unless I become my own person. I have nothing wrong with this and that, but I've got to become my own person because my cult says so. I've got to find myself because my cult is defined by the individuals who find themselves. A distinct individual, a rugged wanderer. So anyway, the I is a fractal representation of the cult. The I is an identity. And we need this pattern. If we look at what life is up to, in human evolution, it starts with sympathy, then goes to antipathy, and then goes to synthesis. This is how life creates iteration and variety. The cult is downloaded into the infant unquestioned. That's sympathy. The adolescent, when it gets fed up with the tremendous imperfections of the cult, lists out, if they mature into healthy adolescence, they list out the endless hypocrisy, bullshit, and crap that makes up the cult. That's called antipathy. That says the whole thing is bunk, ridiculous. That you lied over here, but you said you didn't like lying. You said the meek will inherit the earth, but you're trying to tell me to go get the sale. You're saying money is, the poor and this and that, but you're constantly trying to get more money, and you're not going to church because you can make more money by making the real estate deal on Sunday. And the whole thing is, and the teachers talking about don't have affairs and this and that. Well, they're off doing that, and the Catholic Church is defending the priests who are pedophiles, and the parents are telling the kids don't sass them when they're pointing out the lies of the parents, and the politicians are stealing the money, whether they say is for the people, and the whole thing is full of shit. And then there we are with that thing, where do we come back to making shit derogatory? The whole thing is filled with fertilizer for the system to go on. So that's antipathy. That's when you see the flaws and inconsistency in every imperfect system. And then the last bit is synthesis. It's called unique iteration. So life downloads the status quo in a child, makes sure the adolescent is fully outraged and aware of every single inequity and crime in the cult. And then the adult comes along and rejects the worst aspects of the cult and embraces the best aspect of the cult and does it differently. And then the adult passes that new program to their children. It's called sympathy. The children grow up to find out it's full of shit, the fertilizer of the cult. And then they grow up and throw out the worst of their parents, bring in the best of their parents, and do it uniquely and differently. And life, or evolution, goes on. Now, evolution likes to win. It's been winning very nicely the last 24 billion years, creating all that is from this little tiny bit of energy. Life likes to win, and life's strategy for winning is diversity and uniqueness. Because if you roll one dice, you may not get a lucky 7. You certainly won't with one dice get a lucky 7. So if you roll 2 dice, you might get a lucky 7. But it's a bit risky if you really want to win. So what life does is it takes 8 billion dice, gives them all the sympathy, antipathy, synthesis protocol that's been creating endless amounts of abundance since the beginning of time, and 8 billion dice roll out, and some of them do better than others in a given environment. Some of the dice do better than others. And they live longer and are happier and are more attractive in their long life and happiness and health and get the best options and the best mates and the best situations and have more children. And some of those iterations failed and died, and some long strangled deaths. And that's life, creating life through sympathy, antipathy, synthesis, experiment, and repeat. Sympathy, antipathy, synthesis, experiment, find what works, and repeat. And life rewards the winner. You guys have sex together, you guys have sex together, you guys have sex together. Oh, your body's really produced a great runner. That runner wins the race. That runner gets the prize for winning the race, gets the reward, has more benefits within the cult. And life continues. So we need an identity. The cult needs an identity, and we need an identity. The identity is always flawed. Almost every aspect of every identity, repetitive pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, can be iterated 10 times. Iterating an identity on a massive scale, meaning improving the education system, the prison system, the religious system, the burial system, the agricultural system, the business system, the building system, the drainage system, the water system. Iterating everything 10 times in one go is a tremendous change, which asks people to go into the unknown, which asks people to confront their worst fear, which asks people to confront their trauma, which they cannot do as trauma-illiterate cult members. So the first step in iterating a 10x cult, a 10x identity, is understanding and healing trauma. Because then when you trust the unknown and you trust evolution, it's not a bad thing to trust, given that evolution took an energy mass this big and created all of the multiverse with it. Not a bad bit of handiwork in only 24 billion years, with an infinite amount of time and counting. It's a pretty good bit of work. Now, when is the ego destructive or constructive? Well, every identity, every ego, that's the part of us that is the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. It's repetitive. This is me. Now, what's important to know about the ego and the identity is that it is always out of touch with reality. So it's at war with reality. But it is buying time to process things. And so, consciousness wants to move beyond the cult norms, but the cult says, shut up and do what you're told. It's fighting reality. Consciousness wants to grow. The cult is putting it back. So there's a tension between the child and the cult, between reality and the cult, between evolution and the cult. And yet, the question is, since we need to free up some bandwidth by normalizing certain things, everyone drives on the right side of the road. It's not a bad one. What would happen if everyone drove wherever they wanted and decided at the last minute? Well, you couldn't look up, look down and drink a coffee. You'd have to drive about 5 miles an hour because someone might just drive into your lane to be authentic, right? And so it's a good norm. You just stay on the right side of the line. Everyone stay on the right side of the line. And that's what you get. You get flow, you get speed, you get efficiency. but you also get numbness and you get sleep. So there's this balance. So the unhealthy ego is the repetitive thoughts, feelings, words, actions, memes, and sensations, things that you do, that are in the way of who you could be and your dreams. And they all are. But it's an iterative process. You see, the current identity is in the way of your future self. But the future self is blocked by your future self. And if you were still identical to 2 years old, your 2-year-old was in the way of getting here. But it's a process. It's a process. You set a goal, and the goal is, of course, flawed because it's based on the current level of intelligence, which is based on the current level of consciousness, which is based on the current level of language and paradigm, which is based on the cult. So every single system is flawed. Every paradigm is flawed. It will all be outgrown. But if you take a battery, and you take one battery that lasts for a minute and costs $200, and you replace it with a battery that lasts for 5 minutes and costs $5, that is thousands of % of improvement because the cost has come down and the value has gone up. And that battery is standing in the way of the next battery, which costs less and lasts for 2 hours, which is in the way of the next battery, which costs less and lasts for 8 hours, which is in the way of the battery that takes energy from the environment faster than it spends energy, and that you don't have to replace as long as the sun's burning, as long as some part of nature is doing its thing. That's a pretty good battery. But even that maybe needs to be replaced every 100 years, and some people might develop a new battery that lasts 1,000 years. Or it may not be a priority. So, you are an ego. What does that mean? It means you are occupying, you are defending your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Is that good or is that bad? Well, there's a couple of things. It's always bad if you understand that the ego is at war with reality and with the self. It's at war because it's holding a default pattern that is not the most intelligent response with what is. It's just an unconscious algorithm. It's kind of like you program a robot. You say, Dad's not due home. Dad's not due home for another 3 days. We don't want to be burgled. So program the robot to shoot anyone who comes into the courtyard. It's a good program. Better than being robbed and raped, regularly. Okay, so you program the robot in, it's got the program. And Dad comes home 3 days early for a surprise and gets shot down by the robot. Was the robot better than nothing? Yes. But the next iteration of the robot, someone's going to program the robot not to shoot family members. That will sell like hotcakes when it's all in the papers or the cyborg, virtual media. That, the tremendous tragedy of shooting your father, and now the new chip recognizes relatives and will not shoot, even when commanded to, with all the right passwords because you don't want to kill your family member, do you? Just buy the new robot here. And so that's how evolution moves. So that robot doesn't kill family members, but it doesn't do something else. It doesn't do something else. So the truth of the matter is that every repetitive pattern is imperfect to one degree or another. 2, there is an infinite continuum of ideal and perfection. And so evolution occurs that our standards keep raising, and our skills keep raising, and our technology keeps raising, and then our standards raise even more. So the real thing comes down to the rate of change. How much change can you digest determines how much intelligence you have the capacity to engage in without being traumatized. And what about the people around you? Since if you start talking a new language that's 10 times better than the other language, except that nobody understands what you're saying, so even though it's theoretically 10 times better, it's like producing the first Apple computer when all the software is for Windows. It doesn't matter if there's something better about the Apple computer if you can't get any of the existing software to load it. So then you have to create the software and the computer in tandem for its excellence to be revealed. And then if you have to learn to use it in a different way, you also have to find people willing to learn to use it in a different way. And so this is the, this is the whole, crisis around the one part of the self and the one part of the psyche, the intelligent part, wanting to change, and this tremendous backlash to it's too much, it's too fast, I don't want to think, I don't want to feel, stop making me think and feel more than I want to, I don't want to move. You have evolution and you have the ego. The ego wants to kill the future to maintain the status quo. The future wants to kill the status quo to evolve into something so much more intelligent. If we could only tear down all these old houses and have, brand new, skyscrapers and things instead of this, we could only do that, then it would just be so amazing, and we would, we would all benefit. And then, no, this is the way it's been since 1855, and don't you see, this is a national heritage, we have to remember the past, and we bow because our grandfathers bowed and stuff like this. And so this tension between tradition and intelligent evolution is partly a tension between brain bandwidth. Can we honestly because if you just freeze in total chaos and say, do something, you're going to do something worse than the cult. So, if you just throw the whole cult out and paralyze yourself with overwhelm, I've got to do something, do this. It's not going to be better. So you need a status quo to start with, and you say, okay, this is, 60% of our students get an A. Okay, that's with this protocol. You're spending X amount of money, you're doing X amount of hours, you've got these amount of workbooks, and 60% are doing that. Well, you don't just throw it all out and start from scratch. You say, well, how could we get that to 80%? You iterate. You try this, you try that, you try this. Now you say, okay, we're going to do 80% there. So the ego is always wrong, but it's necessary. The ego is always wrong, but it is necessary. And it's necessary to manage overwhelm. And the ego is at war with reality, but it is necessary for our narrow-minded attention to navigate through reality. And so you could say that all ego is good. You could say that no ego is good. But I think the real question is, as an identity, moving towards a more and more intelligent identity, with this illusion of separation through the lens of the cult, how can I embrace change and growth more and more and more over time? And what is my sense? How can I build into my identity an identity that iterates identity regularly, that updates? It's been pointed out in the US, we are suffocating under a bureaucracy of old laws that do not have expiration dates. And what we really need to be doing is saying that every law will expire in 30 years unless it is voted in again with a majority at that time. Otherwise, the law expires. And then it starts freeing up space so we don't just get suffocated under an endless bureaucracy. Thanks for joining me on this exploration.